So, do you guys remember when the likes of President Biden and Dr. Fauci were trying to downplay all the science that contradicted what they were saying and how they made people look like conspiracy nuts just because they thought to question what the government was saying? Well, it's all coming to light now. I just heard about this new study that showed how heart attack deaths rose by 30% in people ages 25 to 44 during the pandemic. Now, I wonder what could possibly have made the difference. Could it have been the C-19 itself, or maybe all the guidance and the vaccines that they try to push on us? All the evidence is coming to light right now, though. First, a super analysis of mask studies, they even called it a gold standard analysis, showed that face coverings made little to no difference to C-19 infections or death rates. And those lockdowns that they put us under? A new study found out that lockdowns, school closures, and limiting gatherings only reduced C-19 mortality by 0.2%. Keep in mind, this was at enormous economic and social costs. This also contributed to pushing millions of people into obesity and a perfect storm of risk factors. And about those vaccines, data has been turning out about how Johnson & Johnson's vaccine puts people at risk of blood clots. The CDC even had to change their guidelines because of this. Now, as for Pfizer, they're still looking into the possible link between the Pfizer bivalent shot and strokes in people who had them. I've definitely heard about things like this. A friend of mine, their 52-year-old husband died recently of a heart attack 2 weeks after having C-19, even though he had both jabs and 2 boosters. The autopsy said his arteries were blocked but had no previous symptoms, and he was also super fit. Definitely brings up the question of vaccine injury and whether his wife or kids should get something from the government for this. But what about you guys? What do you think? Another study found out that immunity acquired from a prior C-19 infection is as protective as vaccination against severe illness and death. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about all this. Do you trust the likes of Dr. Fauci and the CDC when it comes to our health now? Drop us a quick yes or no in the comment section down below. Oh, and we're also going to talk about the money opportunity here. We all know lawmakers and billionaires like Bill Gates profited big time from the pharmaceutical stocks. So the question is, are pharmaceutical stocks a great investment option even now after the pandemic? Definitely tune in to find out. And for the best way to invest in gold, hit the link in the description down below this video. All of that in our video today. Definitely stay right there, guys. Now, about this mask debate. Can we finally put this mask debate to bed? This is practically the gold standard of research that we're talking about here. A meta-analysis of 78 studies and 1 million people without a doubt concluding that face mask coverings made little to no difference to C-19 infection or death rates. The research carried out by the Cochrane Institute, the gold standard of evidence-based reviews, they looked at 78 global studies involving 1 million people. That's a lot of people. That is a pretty substantial sample size. Results indicated that surgical masks reduced the risk of catching C-19 or a flu-like illness by 5%, a figure that is so low that it may not even be statistically significant in most cases. But here's the thing, guys. Even during C-19, studies failed to show definitively that masks prevented C-19, yet millions of Americans were forced to abide by mask mandates, and it's definitely an agenda here. As early as the spring of 2020, a separate Danish study with over 6,000 participants found that wearing a mask made no statistical difference to whether people got C-19 or didn't get it. But its researchers struggled to find a prominent journal willing to publish the results. The study even suggested that there is actually a 1% increased risk of testing positive if you wore the mask, but the margins were too small to actually say this for certain. The team also said these results were moderate certainty evidence. Then, Chief Medical Advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci said in 2020 that masks were not providing the perfect protection that people think it is. He later suggested people should wear masks as a mark of respect for others, and admitted to lying to the public about masks' effectiveness to prevent panic buying and preserve masks for healthcare workers. Now, fast forward to today, the CDC's website still states that masks can help protect the wearer and others from C-19. The agency is still recommending Americans wear masks in places with high transmission levels, such as on public transportation, but critics of the mask claim that they have actually hindered communication and children's development and progress at school. Rises in RSV and flu this winter were also partly connected to face covering mandates because they prevented children from gaining natural immunity to other illnesses. Now, speaking of schools, let's take a look at those lockdowns and closings that they imposed upon us. According to the latest study, the original C-19 lockdowns had little to no effect on pandemic death tolls in the United States, the UK, and Europe. Though, another analysis, economists found that strict restrictions imposed in spring of 2020, including stay-at-home orders, compulsory masks, and social distancing, only reduced C-19 mortality by 0.2%. 0.2%, guys. You might as well say it didn't do anything. everything. They warned that the lockdowns caused enormous economic and social costs and concluded that they are ill-founded and should be rejected as pandemic policy instruments going forward. The review, led by a Johns Hopkins University professor of all people, argued that border closures had virtually zero effect on COVID mortality, reducing deaths by 0.1%. What they did find out, though, was that closing non-essential shops was found to be the most effective intervention, leading to a 10.6% drop in virus fatalities. Their report said that this was probably due to shutting pubs and restaurants where alcohol is consumed. School closures were linked to a smaller 4.4% decrease. The study hasn't been thoroughly vetted with a peer review yet. They originally identified 18,590 global studies into lockdowns, which they claim had to be whittled down to just 24 to reach their research question. And so this is why critics have accused them of cherry-picking studies to suit their narrative and have raised doubts about the biases of its authors, since they've been pretty vocal about lockdowns and vaccine mandates on social media. And hey, at least we're finally hearing both sides of the debate, right? And we're also researching a growing consensus among doctors and health experts that these strict restrictions have led to a rise in non-C19 deaths, like for people whose conditions worsened during the pandemic when they could not access healthcare. The study offered some suggestions about why lockdowns didn't achieve their ultimate goal in saving lives. Lockdowns may have had greater unintended consequences than what was previously thought. An example they gave was that isolating people at home may have led them to passing a higher viral load to their family members, causing even more severe illness. Or closing certain retail businesses may have led to higher concentrations of people in the essential shops, where risk of transmission became higher. Now, another possible theory is that people's behavior rebounded after lockdowns squashed case rates so low, they perceived the virus as less of a threat. They claimed the best explanation for discovering C19 death rates in countries was differences in population's age and health and the quality of the health sector. But they could not rule out less obvious factors such as culture, communication, and coincidences. C19 deaths were also skewed by the volume of testing that each country carries out, which many scientists have highlighted as the driving factor behind Britain's large toll. Now, there's also the argument that pandemic restrictions and guidelines cause more harm than good. Case in point, the fact that the pandemic may have pushed millions more people into obesity. According to emerging data from around the world, young people have actually been particularly badly affected, according to the research from countries including the United States, China, and Europe. In one U.S. study, for example, the number of overweight and obese people jumped by more in just 1 year of the pandemic than it did over the previous 2 decades. Experts said many different factors may be behind this rise, from decreased movement during the lockdowns to coping with the added stress of the crisis. Out of control inflation could have certainly played a higher role, as higher prices could have pushed people toward cheaper but unhealthier food choices, making the problem even worse. This is definitely going to ripple out for everybody. Now, as the experts pointed out, quote, the implications of more obesity in young people is going to translate over decades into more diabetes, more heart disease, more of the other complications related to obesity, which is going to impact people's lives in a very negative way. That also has impacts on the health service. You have to then have more doctors looking after people, and of course, it means we're going to have an even less strong position if we have another pandemic. End quote. Now, one study in the Journal of American Medical Association last year suggested that on average, people have put on 1.5 pounds every month during the lockdown. And it's affecting our kids too. They found that the prevalence of being overweight or obese among 5 to 11-year-olds, it rose from 36% pre-pandemic to 46% after the pandemic. After correcting for the normal increase that would have been expected without C19, that represents a striking 9% increase. They explained it here, quote, schools were closed, recreational activities were curtailed, social activities restricted, and the food supply impacted. These changes, combined with the emotional and financial stress caused by the pandemic, may impact energy balance and consequently body weight. End quote. Now, I do have friends that have used the pandemic as encouragement that they needed to finally take my health seriously. Now, one of them only eats healthy meals that they cook for themselves. They exercise daily and they're more spiritual now. It cured their depression and they lost 75 pounds. And you know, they never even got tested, never got jabbed, never got sick. I'm gonna let you guys come up with your own conclusions there. In fact, why don't we talk about those vaccines now? Did you guys hear about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and how it's causing a risk of rare blood clotting syndrome? The CDC had to change their guidelines and recommend that Americans choose to receive mRNA shots from Pfizer and Moderna over the Johnson & Johnson vaccine due to the rare cases of blood clotting. But I don't know, I will watch out for those other vaccines too. News on the streets is that, it's saying that the CDC and the FDA just flagged a possible link between the new Pfizer BioNTech BioNTech bivalent C19 vaccine and strokes in people aged 65 years old and older. Now, of course, Pfizer and BioNTech are saying that there's no evidence to conclude this ischemic stroke is associated with the use of the company's C19 vaccines, end quote. Now, according to the House and Commerce Chair Kathy McMorris Rogers, quote, if there is one lesson that the CDC and FDA should have taken away from the pandemic is that the importance of providing honest, clear, precise, and timely information to the American people about the potential risks and benefits of C19 interventions, including vaccination, end quote. I mean, I've heard that the best thing about being a conspiracy theorist is not suffering from myocarditis. Data has shown an elevated risk of myocarditis and pericarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle and membrane, respectively, after the second mRNA vaccine dose among males aged 12 to 39 years old, with those in their late teens and 20s most affected. Plus, new information is coming out about how immunity from regular C19 infections provides the same strong protection as vaccines against severe illness and death. But here, check this out.
Hey, good afternoon. It can be a little bit confusing, so let me be really clear. This study is not saying that you won't be reinfected if you already had the COVID-19 illness. What we're talking about is protection against severe illness if you are reinfected. So here's what the study is saying in really plain language. If you had COVID, you will be protected against becoming really sick or dying if you were to be reinfected, again, by 88%. That protection, according to the study, lasts for at least 10 months. That's really significant and really good news, considering that we've had almost 103 million cases of COVID-19 since the pandemic began in this country alone, and we're still logging an average of 35 to 40,000 cases every single day.
That's an 88% risk reduction in hospitalization and death from a C19 reinfection thanks to infection-acquired immunity. Now, according to the senior study author, quote, this is really good news in the sense that protection against severe disease and death after infection is really quite sustained at 10 months, end quote. Now, what about the money angle? We all know our lawmakers have certainly made a killing getting rich from these pharma stocks. So could pharmaceutical stocks still be a good investment option even after the pandemic? Well, I don't know. I took a look though. Now, as we all know, the pharmaceutical industry has been at the forefront of the pandemic response with the development and the distribution of vaccines and their treatments. But even beyond the pandemic, there are several reasons why pharmaceutical stocks can be a good investment option. Now, I'm speaking purely financially. First, you can't deny the increasing demand for drugs and for treatments. You got the aging population, increasing rates of chronic diseases, whether man-made or natural, plus advances in medical technology. These are all factors leading to a growing demand for pharmaceutical products. And it's also a pretty consistent revenue stream as people need medicines and treatments regardless of how the economy is doing. And those big pharma companies like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, BioNTech, they just love choking out any budding competition with the high barrier of entry into the industry. And you have the harsh regulatory environment, the high cost of research and development, and the need for extensive clinical trials. This means that established companies have a competitive advantage. Top of mind, pharmaceutical stocks to consider are Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Moderna. So Pfizer is a multinational pharmaceutical company that has been in operation for over 170 years. Pfizer's got a strong pipeline of drugs, including treatments for cancer and rare diseases, and a growing biosimilars business. This is where they offer officially approved versions of original innovator products when the original product's patent expires. Johnson & Johnson, ticker symbol J&J. So Johnson & Johnson's a multinational medical devices, pharmaceutical, and consumer goods company. The company has a diverse range of products, including baby care products, medical devices, and pharmaceuticals. Johnson & Johnson is a dividend aristocrat, meaning it has increased its dividend payout for over 25 consecutive years. Moderna is a biotechnology company that's specializing in developing messenger RNA therapeutics and vaccines. The company has received a lot of attention for its C19 vaccine, but it has a pipeline of mRNA-based treatments for other diseases, including cancer and autoimmune disorders. Now, some tips when you're looking at these pharmaceutical stocks. You want to look for companies with a strong pipeline of drugs and treatments. This means that the company has a promising future beyond the current products. Look for companies with a solid financial position. Companies with high debt levels or low cash reserves may struggle in the event of an economic downturn. Consider dividend-paying stocks. Now, the dividend-paying stocks provide a steady income stream and can be a great option for long-term investors, even retirees who need retirement income. So yeah, do your homework and see if these pharmaceutical stocks might be a good fit for you as a possible investment option. Of course, it doesn't hurt to add to your income streams, right? And investing is just one of the options to do this. Feel free to let me know if you want to learn more about zero capital investing and side hustle opportunities with no cash input. I'm definitely open to discussing more about this if you guys are interested. Also, if you own a home, make sure your home is protected. Get your free home warranty quote. There's a link in the description down below of this video. Never want to be caught off guard by another very expensive, unexpected home repair again. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for your daily dose of the truth. But that's it for today's C19 update and stock market report. The new study is showing all the lies that they've been feeding us about masks, lockdowns, and all those vaccines, plus how pharma stocks could still be a good investment even after the pandemic. Appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for hitting the like button as always and showing love. Please be kind to one another, and I'll see you in the next one.